What's up everybody, my name is Zachariah Crosby. In today's video, I'm gonna go over my worst real estate deal ever, and wanted to go over this one with y'all because real estate is not all sunshine and rainbows. You're dealing with the worst of society sometimes. So be sure to like and subscribe and hit the notification bell so that way you're notified every time I upload a video, and that way you too can learn and start your own real estate journey. So this deal we had in West Dallas. Little bit of backstory on how I got this deal. We had a pre-foreclosure list, a tax pre-foreclosure list that is specifically. And I knew this deal was gonna be a deal when I was calling it because first of all, it was a vacant property and the seller had lived at a state. She had actually lived in Florida. So I knew that there was multiple levels of distress there. She had code violations, liens against the property. She was behind on taxes, and it was a vacant property. And she lived out of state. So how is she going to take care of it? She couldn't. So I engaged in a conversation with this seller after skip tracing her, and she began to tell me about the property and that she had tenants at one point and that they vandalized the property and they didn't pay her, and eventually she had to evict them. And I was just listening to the story. I'm like, okay, you know what? Just curious, Mrs. Seller, what is a price that you would take today if we can get this deal done and get this out of your hands before the county takes it from you, in Tuesday of next month? And she comes back to me and she says she wants 100 grand. Property is worth about 175, 180 at this time, from what I recall. And she was describing the property to me that it needed a lot of work. Little did I know how much work this property needed. I thought it just needed some cosmetics, maybe do the roof and HVAC system, and then boom, you'd be done. But there's a lot more surprises that came along with this deal. Running the numbers at first glance, we needed to be around 90 to 95. So I thought that we would be able to come to a deal. I told her, hey, we're not too far off. Can I come to the property, take a look at it? Is there any way I can get access? And she's like, yeah, you can go and take a look at it. I live in Florida though, but there's no way I can get you access. You're gonna have to, go at your own risk. And I'm like, okay, this is the first time I've ever done this, having to get access on my own. This was maybe my 5th deal at this point. I was still fairly new to the real estate game. So West Dallas, we take a whole day, we travel out to West Dallas. Meanwhile, I live in west of Fort Worth, so this is about 45 minutes to an hour with traffic. So I take my dad out there with me, and I take a gun because I don't know what's gonna come out of this. And we get to the property, looked vacant, was empty, and I knock on the door, say, hey, showing real estate agent, here to see the property, just to alert anybody, if anybody's there. Nobody answered the door. Ran around the back, knocked on the door. I mean, the grass was taller than me at this point, so I'm getting stickers and, getting bit by bugs. I mean, this is 100-degree heat in the middle of the summer. Nobody answers the door. As I was about to leave, somebody opens the door. Big 6'5", 300-pound dude, looks like he just ate, a nasty cheeseburger, had nasty, ketchup stains, and just like, he looked homeless. He answers the door as I was walking to the car. He says, what do you want? And I turn to look at him like, hey, I'm just coming to see the property. The seller sent me to see the property. We're about to buy this. And he's like, she didn't send you to the property. I'm like, yeah, she sent me to the property. He's like, well, you can't come in. And I'm like, okay, is there any reason why? He said, well, I stay here, you can't come in. And he shut the door in my face. Then pulled up behind me was an Uber driver. And then I'm just sitting here in confusion, like, what just happened? And why is there an Uber right behind me? And he comes out, and then a girl with purple hair comes out, and they go into the Uber and they drive off. He locks the door, and I don't say anything at this point. I'm just kind of shocked and confused. So I drive another hour back home, pissed off and mad. I'm like, what just happened? Let me call the seller and see if she knows anything about this. So I call the seller and I tell her everything that happened. It's like, hey, there's somebody living in the property. You said it was vacant. Are you sure? I mean, do you know who this guy is? Do you know who's living here? And she goes, no, I don't know anybody that's living there. I've evicted the person that was living in there. Did you get their name? And I was like, no, I didn't get their name, they really wouldn't want to talk to me. They were pretty hostile. She was like, well, now we got squatters, so you're dealing with the squatter situation. I didn't even know what a squatter was. So we got some hostile people that took it upon themselves to break into this house and make it their own house with no lease, no sort of paperwork, anything that says that they're allowed to be there. And this was during COVID time, so there wasn't really much that the police would do. Even though I knew I had to do something, I had to get somebody involved, and I just kind of game plan with the seller. I'm like, okay, well, what are we gonna do? Because I want to buy this deal, and you got somebody in here who's not allowing me to see the property. How are you gonna be able to sell this to me? I can't see the property, and you are about to lose this property in 3 weeks. And she says, well, see if you can call the police and get them to get rid of the tenants and change the locks as soon as you do. I'm like, okay, so I gotta go make another trip out there. So I take it another weekend, go out there, I make it a trip, and I get to the property again and I knock on it, and nobody answers the first time. Second time, the guy answers and he's butt naked. I mean, literally, this guy is butt naked. When he answers the door, about 5 cats ran out right under me. And I'm just like in disbelief. I'm looking at this dude like, dude, can you at least get some clothes on? I need to talk to you. So he shuts the door in my face. He at least puts some pants on. I mean, he's got the girl in the background. I don't know what they were doing, but he was naked. And, I got a glimpse of, his butt cheeks, and it was very scarring. So he opens the door and I tell him, listen, you need to get out of this property. You don't have a lease. I talked to the seller. Do you even know the seller's name, for one? And he says, yeah. The seller's name is Kelly. And I go, so how do you know the seller but you don't have any documentation that you're supposed to be here? And then he goes on and makes up this story about how he's talked to the seller and that, he was a tenant and that he fell behind on rent and that he couldn't make up the payments and that she was not supposed to evict him, yada, yada, yada. And he said, I don't need to provide any paperwork. Very arrogant. I don't need to provide any paperwork to you. This is my house and I'm staying here. And I tell him I had to calm down. I had said, listen, I'm just here to help the seller in this situation. Doesn't matter what you do if you think you own the property or not. The seller's about to lose the property in 3 weeks. Or in 2 weeks at this point. So if you think you own the house or are supposed to be in the house, you don't, and you're about to be kicked out, in 2 weeks if you don't get your stuff together, or if you don't help me, help her. Either way, he's getting kicked out. So I told him, listen, I'm gonna call the police. If I come back here, I'm gonna have the sheriff with me, and we're gonna forcefully remove you from this house if I see you here the next time I come back next weekend. And he says, yeah, right. I'd like to see you try. I was like, okay, let me get your number. I said it kind of arrogantly, and he's like, fine. He actually gives me his number. I don't know why, but he gave me his number, and I'm kind of glad I did, because the whole week I'm texting him saying, listen, man, you better get out of the property. You don't have any type of lease. That same day, I called the police just to make a show, just to let him know that I am serious. And I called the police and explained to them what's going on. And, I have my iPad out there to help me to evaluate rehabs. I had a spreadsheet where I would evaluate rehabs, put certain numbers in, yada, yada, yada. And for some reason, I lost that iPad that day, completely and totally lost it. I think he stole it, honestly, when I had my back turned when I was talking to the police. But I had to let him know that I was serious, so I did have the police come out that day just to talk to him. They said they couldn't do nothing. They said they couldn't do jack squat. Again, this was COVID time, so, Dallas police, they don't really want to do anything. They're kind of lazy, but at least let him know that I was serious and I was going to do something if he didn't leave the property because he wasn't supposed to be there. So next week goes by, during that whole week, I'm texting him, I'm telling him, listen, I'm having the police come with me on Saturday to remove you if you're not from the house. He says he kind of gives up at this point because I'm badgering him all day, sending him texts, threatening him, saying, listen, you need to get out. I will sue you. I will evict you, yada, yada, yada. And I wasn't willing to do any of that. But I told him I was, because I had to get a deal. And he finally says on Thursday, he says, fine, I have somewhere to stay. I'll be out of the house by Saturday. And I'm like, okay, let's see it. So Saturday rolls around and I go to the property and we pull up. I got my gun on me. Property's same condition as it was before from the outside. I knock on the door and no one answers. I knock on it again, no one answers. Knock on it at least 4 or 5 times, and I didn't hear nothing, not a peep. So I'm like, okay. So I take 3 steps back, charge at the door, and kick it right under the lock. Boom! Knocked that door right open. That door came swinging. Once that door came swinging right open, man, I'm telling you, another 15 cats came running out the house. I walk in that house. This house smells like straight death. Horrible. Seared my nose. Like, I can still smell it to this day. Walk in there, and there's toilet paper with crap on it throughout the house, in the kitchen, just flies swarming, just mounds of food. There's an entire mattress on the right hand corner of where they were actually sleeping. It was disgusting. They were sleeping on this mattress. I mean, it was just looking nasty. And then in the other room, there was another mattress, and it had about 3-4 cats that were sitting in the window sills, but the mattress had a mound of cat crap. Just a mound. I'm talking maybe 6 feet tall, that goes in a perfect mountain shape. I'm wondering how does this even happen? And it smelled like horrible, like death. During this time that I'm looking at this property, I'm having to step over junk just to see the rooms, and I'm getting eaten by fleas. I walked out of there with my legs looking like I had chicken pox because I was getting totally eaten by fleas. And I got out of there. I got out of there as quick as possible. There was 3 bedrooms and 2 bathrooms. I can only get 2 bedrooms and 1 bathroom. I was out of there. I was disgusted. I'm like, this is the worst property I've ever seen in my life. What made it even worse is that I only made $5 grand off of the deal. I told the seller, I sent her the pictures. I'm like, miss, this property is completely trashed. I had to evict a squatter from your house for you. I need the property at $70,000. And she said, nope, the least I can take is 85. And I'm just like, at this time, you know, I'm not under contract. I'm just looking at the property. I knew I was going to get it under contract. Now I'm doing way too much to get a contract at this point. And I just finally give in. I said, okay, fine. Because I just wanted a deal so bad. And I've already went through all of this crap to get to this point. I was just ready to sign a deal. So I signed the deal at 85. I have my buyers go in there. I told everybody, I said, beware. Make sure you bring a hazmat suit with you. Make sure you bring, you know, hand sanitizer and a mask, because that property stinks and it's infested with fleas. So my buyers went out there. A lot of buyers dropped out. I had one buyer that came in and said, listen, that, you know, I'll buy the house, I want it. And I actually found that buyer through a real estate agent that I was really good friends with, that I had built up a relationship with by just cold calling agents, trying to get deals. And he said he'll buy it for 90 grand. And at that point, I'm like, man, is there any way you can do higher than that, dude? I went through hell trying to buy this deal. And he's like, no, dude, this is the maximum I can do. I'm like, okay. So I signed the contract. That was my only buyer. That was the only option I had. Signed the contract and got that deal done. You know, we're approaching close. Title comes in and says, hey, we found a $8,000 UCC lien for a water softener that we need to clear before we close this. And the seller already had $80,000 worth of liens, and then you put another $7 grand on top of that. I mean, now she's cutting like $2 grand into my check because she was all in about 80, close to what I was buying it at. And the seller, obviously, she came back to me and asked me if I can pay for it because she wanted to walk away with some money. I was like, listen, I can't do that. Like, I've evicted a tenant for you and you're asking me to take a discount? It's like, let me talk to my buyer, see what I can do. So I talked to the buyer and I explained to him the situation, and where he already knows because, you know, they're looking at the title commitment. And he's like, okay, fine. I'll cover half the cost of the UCC lien and she'll walk away with something. I'll cover the other half and we'll call it a day. So I go back to the seller. I say, hey, this is what we can do. Is this good for you? She was like, fine, let's do it. So boom, we get to closing. I make my $5 grand. It was the hardest $5 grand, hardest deal, the worst deal I've ever did. And it was horrible. I still can smell the cat shit to this day. And that's it. That was the end of that. I move on to the next deal and we move on to bigger and better things. Now we know not to evict, you know, a tenant or a squatter for our sellers, especially before you have a contract. And always be careful going to these houses, guys. Very dangerous sometimes when you're dealing with these types of situations. And if you're doing all this work to get the deal, make sure you're getting rewarded for it. Make sure you're negotiating that deal deep enough to where it's actually worth your time. Don't go in there because you need a deal. Don't go in there desperate, making yourself seem as if you need that deal more than the seller, because you are the solution to the seller, not the other way around. So that's it. That's my story. Thanks for listening. Please like, comment, and subscribe. We'll see you on the next one.